Amongst other celebrations, June is Filipino Heritage Month in Canada, and local artists are getting ready to celebrate it in an operatic way later this week. A new Filipino opera is set to be shared for the first time at the Manitoba Legislature this coming Thursday, and it pays tribute to some of the most significant works of fine arts to come out of the Philippines over the last 150 years. The opera is called Noli et Fili, and its creator, Ronald Mervin Sison, joins us in the Classic 107 studios to tell us more. Good morning, Ronald.
Hey, good morning, Nolan. Magandang umaga sa inyo lahat. Mayang buntag sa inyong tanan.
Aha, yeah. Yes, thank you for the Filipino good morning there. That's fantastic. First of all, let's start with the inspiration that we were just alluding to. Where does the sort of source material for Noli et Fili come from?
So Noli et Fili, basically the two national novels of the Philippines. That's where we took that. Noli Me Tangere, which is the first one, and El Filibusterismo, the second one. These are two novels that were written by one author, Dr. Jose Rizal, the de facto national hero of the Philippines.
Okay.
Yeah, standard study.
When were you first exposed to these stories, and what did they mean to you growing up?
They're standard study back in high school.
Okay.
Everyone has to read them.
Wow.
Right? And, as a high school student, you were just, okay, I just need to read this. But, now, as a parent, you're revisiting it and you're in the arts and you're thinking, yeah, there's something very operatic about these two novels. Yeah.
And opera is something that has spoken to you, I understand, as a musical genre for quite a long time. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your story with opera and then maybe how you connect the dots between your operatic background and these two seminal works of Filipino literature.
Yes. So I'd like to joke that it was all a mistake.
Well, actually, all the best things are.
Yeah. So when I was 18, I drove my sister and my brother to an audition for musical theater.
All right.
I just had to drive. I had the license, right? So we drove them, and then they said, hey, why don't you audition too? And just for the fun of it, okay, fine, I'll just audition. I don't sing, I don't dance or anything like that. So long story short, they got me. I didn't get my sister and my brother. So that sort of kickstarted the musical theater journey. But then after a few years, we were too busy with school, and I discovered opera. And the first opera I ever watched was La Traviata, right?
Wonderful.
But of course, I couldn't understand the thing.
Sure.
However, at the end of the third act, with the duet between Violetta and Germont, I started clapping. I was like, wow, that was incredible. Then I started getting into it. So that was it. Then it was quite a struggle to find a teacher in the Philippines at the time. I don't know, maybe it was my voice or whatever it was. And eventually, by accident again, I found a teacher. This was an Italian tenor. We were just sitting in the lobby of a hotel. We just chatted.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Then I moved here. My wife's Canadian, and then Filipino Canadian, and then I was connected with Mel Braun at the Faculty of Music, and I got to study with Robert McLaren for a few years.
Sure.
And that sort of kept things going, and I've been very thankful for all these, little things that have come my way.
Yeah, what a wonderful origin story for opera then. So then when you are thinking about Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, what are you seeing in those stories that have a similar quality to what you first saw when you were first watching Traviata, for example?
Well, the storyline itself is very interesting because those two novels, they're actually the main novel, Noli Me Tangere, and the sequel, El Filibusterismo, which is set 13 years after the first one. A lot of the time, the two works are done separately. There's been plays and musicals and even an old opera about them, but they're separate. However, they are the story of one person, the main character, which is Crisostomo Ibarra. And I thought, why don't we just present this as one work? Right? One large arc.
Yeah.
The story of one person from beginning to end. And
Yes.
everything in between, right?
Perfect.
Because that's what it is.
Yeah, it's just it's this one story, but then this opera movie helps to bridge that sort of 13-year gap between the two characters. Now, this new opera, Noli et Fili, also very much influenced, I understand, by the classical music traditions within the Philippines. For maybe people who haven't had as much exposure to classical music from that part of the world, what makes it stand out in an operatic context when you compare it to works by, again, Verdi, for example?
That's right. So when you think Filipinos, you don't think opera, right? Essentially, you'd think musical theater.
Sure. Yep.
Musical theater, karaoke, choral, maybe, right?
Yep.
But you don't think opera. However, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, the primary composers of the Filipino classical songs, Abdon, Santiago, Abelardo, Buen Camino, Estrella, they came out from this period, right? And the genre they created is something called kundiman.
Okay.
And this kundiman genre, kung hindi man, it's like a combination of the works. Essentially, it's marketed as like a love song, kung hindi man, if it were not so. A lot of it is about love, but it's not just about that. If you read the lyrics, there's a lot of heroism and love for country, not just romantic love.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, when I was studying classical music, I never sang kundiman. It was only here that I discovered it.
Wow.
So my primary repertoire is Italian, and that's I
right.
sing from an Italian
Of
center.
course.
So I said, "What's up?" And then I tried to sing a Filipino kundiman,
Yeah.
and I couldn't sing it. It was hard. My own language. I speak Filipino.
Yeah.
Tagalog.
What makes it so hard in that sense?
How you sing it versus how you say it, because I speak the language, right? So I thought, I think there's a bias, a bias of I speak this language, so this is how it should sound. But then when I try to sing it, it doesn't really place that way, when you're singing it. So it was a struggle to sort of try to put that together.
Yeah.
I know that I'm supposed to be saying, for example, nasaan ka irog, but my brain is telling me it should sound like nasaan ka irog, but when you're singing it operatically, it doesn't sound like that.
No,
right?
no, certainly
so
not.
There's this kind of resistance in your brain, but yeah, it became a challenge to learn. So anyway, when I started discovering it, I fell in love with the kundiman, and coincidentally, and I like to talk about this, but my wife hates this. So
hi to your wife, by the way, listening
she's
in, of
fine.
course.
She's listening in. Hi, love you. Her name is Sharon. Anyway, she her great-great-grandfather's name is Nicanor Abelardo. Nicanor Abelardo is one of the composers we're featuring.
How special is that?
He is one of the fathers of the Filipino kundiman. The National Theater of the Philippines, at the Cultural Center of the Philippines, the main theater is named Tanghalang Nicanor Abelardo, or Nicanor Abelardo Theater.
Wow.
And the University of the Philippines is housed in Nicanor Abelardo Hall. So for me, it's very, it goes full circle, and it's it's a very great honor to have that.
Well, it's so fascinating too to consider that, like, maybe you wouldn't have made the connection to this kundiman that you were just speaking of if you hadn't come to Canada in the first place, because you were just saying it's something
That's
that you
true.
kind of came here
That's true.
and
Yeah.
encountered this
true.
very interesting and unique style of music featured in this opera, which, as we mentioned in the intro, being performed this Thursday night at the Manitoba Legislature. You've gotten quite the outpouring of interest and support for this project, to the point where we're actually, I don't think that there's any more people allowed to come.
Yeah,
and
we're over capacity.
We're over capacity already. Well, for the people who were lucky enough to reserve their tickets, what maybe sorts of things are you looking forward to sharing, not just with a Filipino audience, but also with folks who may not have encountered this music before?
So the Noli at Fili is designed as a Filipino opera, or opera. It's a sing spell right now.
Okay.
But we're writing in the recits and all that. Fully spoken and sung in Filipino with English subs and translations. There'll be English narration by a narrator, just to make the story go long, because we're only performing scenes.
Yes.
We want to keep the program a little short. It's a little long.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that, there's been many productions of, as I say, Noli and Fili
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they always don't get, which is very interesting, is when you read the novel is a colonial novel, social social themes, oppression by the Spanish on the Filipinos, and the mestizos, which is our Métis in the Philippines, right? But what they always don't get is, if you read very carefully, half the characters are European and half the characters are Filipino. So we will cast this opera true to form.
Right.
That half the characters are European and half
Yeah.
the characters are Filipino.
So it's very, really interesting to consider that sort of balance then between these characters that come from different backgrounds, that have these
right.
different cultures that then come together in a way that opera in Canada has been trying to reckon with for several years now. How do we share the stories of different cultures and show these sort of different cultural dialogues, these cultural conversations in opera? What do you hope the future of this show looks like, and what do you hope it adds maybe to that sort of Canadian operatic cultural tapestry?
Yeah, well, first is we want to prove, I want to show that Filipino, or Tagalog, even this Visayan, is an operatic language. It can be sung operatically just like Italian, German, French, even Spanish, Russian, right? That these early composers of the Filipino classical music genre, they are classical composers, and the kundiman is meant to be sung classically, operatically.
Wow.
Not as a karaoke or pop.
Right. Its
and,
own production.
Yeah, its own. And you just think, if you look at their music, these 5 composers, when they were writing, the world was an operatic world. Puccini was at the height of his powers. Verdi was very much in the scene. We already had Bizet, we already had Massenet, Wagner had just passed away. So our composers, our 5 composers, were studying these classical operatic composers. And if you hear the music is somewhere in between. And I like to joke about this. The music of this opera is somewhere in between Fledermaus, Cavalleria Rusticana, La Traviata, La Boheme, and Pagliacci. Somewhere there.
Okay.
In the middle. That's where
Well, it's a really good way to help to orient an audience that might not have come to contact with this musical style before, help them to orient themselves to where this is sort of landing musically. Maybe in the last 30 seconds of our time together, what do you hope the next couple of steps are going to be for Noli et Fili, and when we can hear it next?
Yeah, we're continuing development on this one, and then we'll be updating everybody as to the next test show.
Fantastic.
And then hoping we can mount this as a full Filipino opera.
Amazing. Yeah. We are really looking forward to seeing what this becomes. Ronald Mervin Sison, the creator of Noli et Fili, thank you so much for joining us in the Classic 107 studios to tell us more.